Today we're going to go over congressional powers. We are going to focus specifically on expressed versus implied powers. So when I am saying congressional powers, I am talking about the power that Congress has. And if you remember, Congress is the Senate, and it's also the House of Representatives. To go over that really quick, because we learned about this a few months ago, the House of Representatives, we have a lot of representatives depending on the state that you live in, because it is based on population. But in the Senate, every state has only 2 representatives. So remember, if a law is being passed or if it is being debated, it goes to the House of Representatives first, and then it goes up to the Senate. All right, so we're going to look specifically at the different types of power that they have. So the expressed powers of Congress are listed in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. There are specific or expressed powers granted to Congress. Another way of saying this is enumerated powers. So when we talk about expressed powers, enumerated is just a synonym, so it means the same thing. Of the 17 powers given by Congress, 6 of them are related to the military. So when something is expressed, what that means is that it is written in the Constitution. It is very specific, and it gives Congress very specific things it is allowed to do, which is why 6 of them are related to the military, because a lot of those need to be written out because the military would deal with things like war. Oops, sorry. Oops, sorry. All right. So, power to tax. Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. They also have the power to pay debt. They provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the U.S. In the 16th Amendment, which was written in 1913, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived. So this is an expressed power. That means it is written down, and it talks about how they can not only tax the people, but what the money can actually be used for. The power to borrow money. They are allowed to borrow money on the credit of the United States. This led to the creation of something called our national debt. It is all the money the U.S. has borrowed over the years and has not yet paid back plus interest. And today's national debt is $17.3 trillion and rising. There's no constitutional debt limit. There's a statutory limit or law that was set by Congress, and it's raised every few years. So every few years, Congress gets together and they talk about what the national debt is. But the Congress is allowed to borrow money from other countries and also lend money to other countries. Postal power. This is another expressed power. Postal power is to establish a post office and post roads to regulate the mail. And it is a federal crime to tamper with mail, steal mail, or send certain items through the mail. This is also something that is written down in the Constitution. So there might be some things that are not talked about with the post office, but there are certain things that you are allowed to do and are not allowed to do. Implied powers is the other type of power. An implied power means that it might not be written down exactly in the Constitution, but it is something that can be done by the Congress because it just makes logical sense that that decision might need to be made in order for a law to be carried through or for a government agency to actually work. So the necessary and proper clause, that's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, and it says, Congress has the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution. This is also called the elastic clause. So you can sort of think about the elastic clause as Congress has the right to basically have a really big rubber band, and it might start around very specific laws, but sometimes they need to stretch that rubber band to make it a little bit bigger because they need to change a couple of ways the laws work or a couple things that they might need to include in order for something to work properly. That's the elastic clause. Here are some examples. So an expressed power, something that is written in the Constitution, is being able to raise an army. But an implied power is establishing a draft to raise an army or develop new armored tanks or construct military bases. In the Constitution, it says that the U.S. is allowed to create an army. It does not talk about military bases. It does not talk about the weapons that might be used. So all of those things can be voted on by Congress and taken care of, but they're not going to be written in the Constitution. An express power could be collecting taxes, but the IRS, which is the place that all of our taxes are dealt with, that needed to be created. That was never written in the Constitution. Establishing a national bank was never written in the Constitution, and punishing those who fail to pay their taxes was never written in the Constitution. And then lastly, an express power is regulating commerce. That has to do with like trade and things that make money. An implied power could be prohibiting importing certain goods, and another implied power could be prohibiting the exportation of certain goods. So even though we want commerce and we want to have goods coming into the United States and goods leaving the United States, there are certain things that we cannot sell, and there are certain things that we do not want to get into the United States. So those are implied powers. They're not going to be written in the Constitution, but the decisions had to be made about them.